few more moments of amiable, but, on the part of the young man, somewhat dazed conversation. Philip had resumed the consumption of his chicken. He raised an overfilled glass to his lips steadily and drank it without spilling a drop. "Mistook me for someone," he remarked coolly. She nodded. "Man who disappeared from the Waldorf Astoria. They made quite a fuss about him in the newspapers. I shouldn't have said you were the least like him, to judge by his pictures, anyway." Philip shrugged his shoulders. He seemed very little interested. "I don't often read the newspapers. So that is Stella." "That is Stella," she assented a little defiantly. "And if I were she—I mean if I were as good-looking as she is—I'd be in her place." "I wonder whether you would," he observed thoughtfully. "Oh, don't bother me with your problems," she replied. "Does it run to coffee?" "Of course it does," he agreed. "And a liqueur, if you like." "If you mean a cordial, I'll have some of that green stuff," she decided. "Don't know when I shall get another dinner like this again." "Well, that rests with you," he assured her. "I am very lonely just now. Later on it will be different. We'll come again next week, if you like." "Better see how you feel about it when the time comes," she answered practically. "Besides, I'm not sure they'd let me in here again. Did you see Stella's coat? Fancy feeling fur like that up against your chin. Fancy—" She broke off and sipped her coffee broodingly. "Those things are immaterial in themselves," he reminded her. "It's just a question how much happiness they have brought her, whether the thing pays or not." "Of course it pays!" she declared, almost passionately. "You've never seen my rooms or my drunken father. I can tell you what they're like, though. They're ugly, they're tawdry, they're untidy. When I've any work to do, they're scarcely clean. Our meals are thrown at us. We're always behind with the rent. There isn't anything to look at or listen to that isn't ugly. You haven't known what it is to feel the grim pang of a constant hideousness crawling into your senses, stupefying you almost with a sort of misery—oh, I can't describe it." "I have felt all those things," he said quietly. "What did you do?" she demanded. "No, perhaps you had luck. Perhaps it's not fair to ask you that. It wouldn't apply. What should you do if you were me, if you had the chance to get out of it all the way that she has?" "I am not a woman," he reminded her simply. "If I answer you as an outsider, a passer-by, mind, though, one who thinks about men and women, I should say try one of her lesser sins, one of the sins that leaves you clean. Steal, for instance." "And go to prison?" she protested angrily. "How much better off would you be there, I wonder, and what about when you came out? Pooh! Pay your bill and let's get out of this." He obeyed, and they made their way into the crowded street. He paused for a moment on the pavement. The pleasure swirl was creeping a little into his veins. "Would you like to go to a theater?" he asked. She shook her head. "You do as you like. I'm going home. You needn't bother about coming with me, either." "Don't be foolish," he protested. "I only mentioned a theater for your sake. Come along." They walked down Broadway and turned into their own street. They entered the tenement building together and stepped into the lift. She held out her hand a little abruptly. "Good night." "Good night," he answered. "You get out first, don't you? I'll polish that stuff up tonight, the first part of it, so that you can get on with the typing." Some half-developed fear which had been troubling her during the walk home seemed to have passed. Her face cleared. "Don't think I am ungrateful," she begged, as the lift stopped. "I haven't had a good time like this for many months. Thank you, Mr. Ware, and good night." She stepped through the iron gates onto her own floor, and Philip swung up to his rooms. Somehow he entered almost light-heartedly. The roar of the city below was no longer provocative. He felt as though he had stretched out a hand towards it, as though he were in the way of becoming one of its children. End of Book 2, Chapter 2. Recording by Leanne Howlett.